Hey, I saw that you watched my webinar on how I launched a six-figure podcast that allows me to spread my message and lands me dream clients. And maybe you're thinking about starting a podcast because you know it can help your business and you want to build an audience, but you're hesitant because you don't feel like you're a natural-born speaker. You don't feel like you're a good storyteller or interviewer. In this video, I'm going to tell you why, even if you're not those things, you can get better. And that there's no better way, no better place to get better at becoming a better communicator than with a podcast. Now, before I tell you why I believe that's true, I am the last person that I can think of in my circle of friends that would have a podcast, because when I first started school, I spent years in ESL, which is English as a second language, right? I didn't speak English well at all. Even after that, I had years and years with an accent and a speech impediment to some degree, and I was always super fearful of public speaking. I would be terrified to be a public speaker, to speak in front of crowds. I'd be terrified to answer the question of introduce yourself when there's an icebreaker in the room. And even to this day, I get nervous thinking about that kind of stuff. So I'm not a great public speaker in front of crowds of people either. But I still took the chance and dived into podcasting. Now when I look back on it, I recognize that podcasting has done so much for me. Not only has it built me an audience, has helped me build a business, but it also helped me become a much better communicator. So if you want to build an audience and become a better communicator, there's no better place to do it than with a podcast. And I'm going to tell you 3 reasons why I believe that is true. So the first one is that I once heard that podcasting is the best way to scale intimacy. Right? Because, one day you'll have 1,000 people tuning in to listen to an episode of yours, but really it doesn't feel that way because, first of all, you're not talking directly to a crowd of people at all, right? You're recording into a microphone, maybe you have a camera you're recording into, and, you can reach thousands of people. But to an audience member, an audience listener, a podcast listener of yours, the way that they experience this is that they're taking their headphones out, plugging into their ears, putting the phone back into their pocket, going for that drive, going for that walk, doing their chores on that commute, and they're locked into you. It's more akin to like a one-on-one conversation than talking to a huge crowd of people. So again, even though your podcast will reach hundreds and thousands of people one day, it's not going to feel that way. It's going to feel like an intimate conversation between you and one other person, right? It's like, as a listener of a podcast, that's how the way that they perceive it. They're not looking at you on a stage. They're not expecting, grand things out of you, right? Which is a good thing because it's more akin to a one-on-one conversation. Number 2 is that you can edit. Right, with a podcast, you can edit as much as you want. You can take as many retakes as you want. And even with an interview, you can do as many retakes as you want. I've done this before. Where a couple of occasions I've done the entire interview over because I didn't like it, or I would, re-ask questions, or if I stumbled over something, I would re-ask it again. And again, with the magic of podcasting, you can edit it all together afterwards and make it sound seamless. On a given episode of mine, I'll spend maybe like an hour talking to the guest, but when I whittle it down, it's about 40-45 minutes of awesome content because I take out stuff that I don't like, right? It's ability for me to edit the podcast itself allows me to create a more polished version while I am getting better as a communicator. I don't have to worry so much about getting it perfect on the first pass. And the reason number 3 is that your audience grows with you, right? Eventually one day, again, with consistency and you putting the right work, your podcast will get to hundreds and thousands of listeners over time, but that's not the way it is right off the bat, right? If you're starting with no audience at all, by the time you grow a podcast to hundreds and thousands of listeners, you have lots of reps in, right? You have lots of time, lots of opportunities to practice and get better at the craft of becoming a communicator. So by the time you get to, thousands of listeners, you already have tons and tons of experience to bring with you, right? So your audience will grow as you get better with your podcasting, get better as a communicator. So you never have to feel like you're being thrust out onto the stage with in front of thousands of people, right? The podcast audience will grow with you, and over time you get better at podcasting along the way. So hopefully that helps you out and that you recognize that, podcasting is a great way to build a business, build an audience, and also, I believe, the best way to become better as a communicator. Now, if you want more help with launching a podcast, growing your podcast, or even creating the content around the podcast to become a better storyteller, communicator, or interviewer, then I invite you to book a 45-minute no-cost podcast strategy call with me. On that call, there's absolutely no obligation to buy anything. It's really to just learn more about your business, your goals, how podcasting fits into all of that, and really to understand if we're going to be a good fit for each other. And we are, and you want to work with me, then I'll tell you more about how my program works on the call itself and answer any questions you might have on the call itself. So again, it's a no cost 45-minute podcast strategy call, no obligation to buy anything at all. And if you're interested in taking advantage of this podcast strategy call, the worst case scenario is that you walk away with more clarity on how to proceed with your podcast and how it fits into your business. If you want to take advantage of this call, this podcast strategy call, all you got to do is click the link or button below this video and book your call with me, and I'll talk to you soon.